Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of the Fantasy Authority show. Tonight, we are getting into the crown jewel, really, for this class. We already talked about the quarterbacks, already talked about some running backs, but the crown jewel for this year is the wide receiver class. Whatever your flavor is, whatever you like. You like the big body boys, we gotcha. You like the shifty guys, gotcha. Slot guys that can do like whatever your flavor of wide receiver is, this class has it all for you. Tonight we're going to get into the top five, try and break these up into more manageable listening pieces for you guys. So we're just going to kick things off. Kev, let's start talking about both of us. We have the same five, just the same top five, just in a different order. But we both have Ja'Marr Chase at 1. You obviously did the video breakdown on him. So I'm going to give you the floor here first. Tell me about Ja'Marr Chase.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of an interesting guy. He's a case study of recency bias because heading into this year, heading into 2020, he was the wide receiver 1 of most everybody. Like I didn't really hear anybody that said that he wasn't. And because he sat this year out because of COVID, that it's like people have dropped him. And, some people have dropped him down to 2 or 3. And to me, like he's still firmly in number 1. Does he have some warts to his game? Sure, but there's not a prospect in this class that doesn't have a few red flags in their game. But Ja'Marr Chase, 6 foot, 207. He was a 4-star prospect out of Louisiana. He had a 19.5 breakout age, which was 78th percentile, 33.4 college dominator. 21.2 yards per reception. He was the Blitnikoff Award winner as a sophomore. You look at his numbers freshman year, he didn't do a ton, 23 receptions, 313 yards. And sophomore year is obviously when he broke out. And next to guys like Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and even Terrace Marshall, who we'll talk about, was also on that team and had double-digit touchdowns. But he had 84 receptions, 1,780 receiving yards, 20 touchdowns, which is super impressive in that offense. And with all the competition that they had, he had a 3.52 yards per reception. He had 24 receptions of 20-plus yards, which is insane because the next closest had 16 receptions of 20-plus yards. He was 6th in the nation in yards after contact. He forced a missed tackle on 26% of his receptions, 5.13 yards after contact, and 22 avoided tackles after the catch. Like, there's a lot of things to love about Ja'Marr Chase. His contested catch ability, route running. Like, I don't think that he is the most polished route runner. At least he wasn't as a soft. I think there's areas to his game that he can certainly improve there. But I think he's somebody that he can definitely create for himself. 6th in yards after the contact or yards after the catch. And he also forced a missed tackle on 26% of his receptions at a ridiculous 5.13 yards after contact. I think he really showed the ability to be able to read press coverage. He played against some of the best corners you'll see, guys who were first-round picks last year, A.J. Terrell, Trayvon Diggs, C.J. Henderson out of Florida, and he torched all those dudes with ease. Some things that I was really impressed with was his ability to use his hands. He is one of his hand technique is some of the best you'll ever see. I guess the biggest question mark for him is he going to be able to gain separation? And while I understand that, because once you get to the next level, things get a little bit more condensed. You're playing against better corners. But like I said, we saw him go against the best. The biggest thing for me when it comes to Ja'Marr Chase is we are looking at 19-year-old Ja'Marr Chase, and when we're trying to evaluate him, because we don't have his junior year tape because he didn't play. Right. And so everything we're looking at is as a sophomore. We don't do that with anybody because we don't have that situation with any of these other guys. Like all these guys have played further than that. And so when you're talking about Devonta Smith is 22 years old. He's going to be 23 in a month or two. Right. And so he is a much older prospect where Ja'Marr Chase is 20 years old and doesn't turn 21 until I think October of this year. And so everything that you could probably nitpick about him is very minor. And I don't think you don't find any big holes in his game. And so for me, Ja'Marr Chase is that dude. He's ultra competitive. He's going to go to a team. He can be a true alpha wide receiver. He does not have the size as some of these other guys are, but he's big enough. To me, my comp for him is he is like a mix between Odell Beckham and DJ Moore, because DJ Moore is a yak monster. And while I don't think that he is a polished route runner like DJ Moore, especially when DJ Moore was coming out, but I think in terms of just looking at what he does after the catch, I think that is a lot of what Ja'Marr Chase is. And then Ja'Marr Chase is the absolute king of the go route and the fade route, which is exactly other things that you look at when you talk about Odell Beckham. So to me, I think he's kind of a mix between those two guys.
I really don't have too much else to add here. For me, the reason why I have him at 1 is because, he has that alpha dog mentality, my ball, get out of my way, kind of shit, just the way that he plays. Like you said, the thing is for him, the big question mark is the separation. He's not going to be creating a ton of separation. I think it was Eric Crocker he put out something on Twitter just about the fact that like corners were, rather comfortable just getting their hands on him, where, especially whenever you're looking at someone who is that dominant in college, like you don't want to fuck up and, try and get hands on him and he just beats you that way. But there were corners that were just jamming him up at the line, but it really didn't matter. Like he was still able to do his thing once the ball was in the air. And if, you look at guys like Allen Robinson, DeAndre Hopkins, like those guys aren't known as great separators, but they get it done for fantasy purposes. I would like to see him build on his release packages at the line of scrimmage, because that's going to help a ton in terms of his separation. He was you were talking about his hand fighting and hand usage throughout the route, and I do think that is a plus with him. But at the line of scrimmage, he kind of just had that one move where he would use both of his hands and kind of just try and rip the DB from out in front of his face. So those are all things he can work on, really just nitpicking him at that point. But like I said, he is my number 1 as well. You were talking about, maybe not the most polished route runner. Well, again, like I said, whatever flavor ice cream you like, you want a polished route runner, we got one of those for you too. And that for us, our number 2, same here as well, Devonta Smith. To me, he is the best route runner in the class. Super fluid, smooth in his movements, his ability to adjust to the ball, I really like. Obviously, this year, absolute historic season when he just absolutely balled out. The one knock that I don't get, and I don't understand how people don't just like go to Google and look this up, but whenever they're talking about, well, just because, Ruggs and Judy are gone, that's why he was doing that well. And then Waddle obviously gets hurt early in the season. He led them last year in yards and touchdowns. Like that's something super easy you can look up in terms of his production. I think he was second with catches behind Judy, but again, led in yards and touchdowns. So there's a lot to like from him, especially from a statistical standpoint. Really, for me, the only knock with Devonta Smith is size, right? Like he doesn't have that prototypical X receiver size, but I think his route running is so good, like a Judy. Like Judy isn't a prototypical X receiver either, but you can stick him on the outside, you can stick him in the slot because of his route running and his ability to create separation. So I know you have him at 2. Just curious to get your thoughts on Devonta Smith, and then we can start to move on down the list.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, he's 6'1", 175, and that's certainly not in the range of what you're looking for a wide receiver. And he also he's gonna have to be the ultimate outlier, because not only does he have kind of a late breakout age, which isn't great. It's 20.8 was his breakout age, 42nd percentile, but he does have a 51.3 college dominator, which is 96th percentile, 15.9 yards per reception. But his BMI is so ridiculously low that there is not a huge track record of wide receivers with low BMIs that really went on to be dominant wide receivers at the next level. I mean, you have guys like Will Fuller, Marvin Harrison is probably the gold standard for it, but there is a long list of guys who have just busted that have low BMI, and so it is a concern, but I don't think it's also, but it's something to me though that I look at him and say, well, he's already beat it, because look at what he's done throughout his career. So I think some of it's being held a little bit too much against him, and I think it should be mentioned and it should be monitored and should be noted with him. But the things that he's able to do is impressive, because I will say this: when I first started looking into him, I saw the frame and everything else. I was like, oh, this is going to be a guy I'm going to like. He's way too small. His BMI is going to be atrocious. This is not going to work. I know I'm going to hate him. So I felt like I went into it a little bit of bias. But when I started looking into him, I was like, okay, I can see a little bit now. If you look at some of his advanced metrics, 4.39 yards per reception, which I think was third among all wide receivers. 8.2 yards after contact per reception was 20th. His 10.7 average depth of target, 15 deep receptions last year was first in all of college football, 589 deep yards. He was used a lot in the slot, 46 receptions from the slot, 863 yards. 35 screen receptions, or 35 of his receptions came from screens, and there's 300 yards was first most. So they did a lot of trying to manufacture his touches and get him out in space, scheme him out in space. Hey, that's what they do a lot in Alabama. Same thing with Jaylen Waddle. They do with those guys. But he did have 11 contested catches last year, I think, which is also number one in this class for this season, or he was either first or second in that. But for a guy his size, like, to see him go up and get the contested catches, he's playing in the SEC against some of the best corners in all of college football. Like, so those are all things that should be mentioned with him, that yes, he is small. He does have a slight frame. And I think we take it too far with, oh, well, at the next level, the corners are bigger and stronger and faster and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But, not everybody plays press. Not every NFL team does those things. So those are things that should be taken in consideration. I thought his strengths for me, he has, just like you said, excellent ball skills. He can make any catch. I mean, some of the catches he made were fucking ridiculous. And again, at his size, like, he's not a big guy, and he is going up there with his body control. He's very fluid, and I think he's just an absolute polished route runner. So I think that he can be really good at the next level. There were times that when guys would press him that would shut him down, that would stop him, but more often than not, he was able to win in most cases. So I think we're just being a little bit too nitpicky with him, and I do think that he deserves to be the number 2 in this class.
Yeah, something you mentioned there in passing that I think we should all keep in mind whenever we're talking about these prospects, whether it's Chase, Waddle, whoever it is. How many, for fantasy purposes, how many corners do we have? Like, whenever we're talking on a week in, week out basis, we're talking about start sets. How many corners do we actually look at and say, like, you know what, like, I'm going to stay away from him this week because of, corner A, corner B? Like, there's really not that many.
And there's not even that many that play, like, that are like elite, like, man press corners, right? Like right. even there's guys that we consider great corners that don't play a lot of press and don't press guys and stuff like that. So, but you're right. There's not even I wouldn't say there's a huge list of just, shut down corners. You have like Jalen Ramsey, who would be on that list. Jair Alexander this year would be on that list, but it's a very Tre'Davious White. It's just a very short list of guys, maybe 4 or 5 players that you really would put in that category. Everybody else, like, there's good corners, there's great corners, but they're not elite and not somebody that every week that you're just super worried about. Like, oh, they're playing this guy. I mean, really, this year it was kind of Jalen Ramsey and probably Jair Alexander were kind of the 2 guys that you probably just didn't want to target somebody with. But other than that, like, there was probably a couple other guys, but more often than not, that you're right. It's just not a huge list.
Yeah. So that's just something whenever you mention about, like, oh, what's he going to do against press and this, that, and the other, like, people are acting like NFL defenses are just exclusively press man and everyone's elite at it, and knowing if you're too small that you can't beat it. So just something for all of you to keep in mind, especially if you're listening to other podcasts and other analysts, and they bring that up. Kind of like, I honestly wouldn't look too far into it until they get to the next level and we're looking at them on a week-by-week basis whenever you guys are tuning in with us on Sunday mornings and we're doing the Start Sit show. Anyway, let's move on to our number 3, and that is Rashod Bateman, someone who I'm excited about. We just did a rookie mock draft on Twitter, and I had the 9th spot. It was a super flex, and I took Bateman at the 109 over Devonta Smith, actually, just because of the safety factor. I feel like Bateman is probably one of the safest prospects, especially at the wide receiver position. He doesn't do anything that's like super elite. I think his best trait is his body control, on the sideline and being able to go up and attack the ball and things like that. But there's also nothing that, like, you really, like, question him with. I think he has a more diverse route tree than someone like Jamar Chase had. He played a lot in the slot this year, so they can move him all across the formation. He played 13% of his slots, 13% of his snaps from the slot in 2019, went up to 61% this past year. So again, he's played all over. That's not something you're going to have to worry about whenever you see some of these guys who play exclusively on one side of the field and at the college level. My only gripe with Bateman is, like, I would like to see more urgency sometimes in his routes, because there are times when he decides, like, all right, I'm going deep, or I'm going to, threaten deep and then come back, whatever the route may be. There are definitely times where he's he's busting off that line and he's getting into his route really quickly. And there's other times where he's kind of just like, almost seems like he's kind of just going through the motions. But again, that's just something that's a nitpick. All around, I think he's a really good, really safe receiver. Kev, I haven't gotten to get your thoughts on Bateman yet, so I'm curious to hear what you have to say about the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
I mean, his profile is pretty flawless, right? I mean, he's 6'2", 210. He's only 21 years old. He had a 43.7 college dominator, which is 88th percentile. He ended up with an 18.8 breakout age, which is 95th percentile. Love to see that. He got better every year of his career. 2018, 51 receptions, 704 and 6. 2019, 60 receptions, 1,219 receiving yards, 11 touchdowns. And then this past year, only in 5 games, 36 receptions, 472 and 2, with a 30% target share. And his target share went up every single year. If you go back to last year, I mean, he was playing with Tyler Johnson, and who's now in the NFL with the Bucs, and played with NFL level caliber talent. And he's just a guy, like, you're right. Like, I just don't think he's a player that's like super flashy, but I think he could be a really, really good wide receiver at the next level. I went back and I didn't use his 2020 numbers for his advanced stuff because I wanted to look at a full season. And last year he had an excellent 3.45 yards per reception, 14 receptions of 20 plus yards, 528 deep yards, 46 receptions of 10 plus yards, which was first in the class, and 36 broken tackles on a career 147 receptions. Like, the dude is a really exciting prospect. And to me, he's big, physical. He might be the most gifted route runner in this entire class, and he can win both inside and out. And my comp for him and him is Allen Robinson. I think he has some Allen Robinson and Keenan Allen to his game. And so, like, I think this guy, he may not be, a top 3 fantasy wide receiver for people, but I think he can certainly cash in, some multiple wide receiver 1 seasons. And so for me, I like Rashod Bateman a lot. If he lands in a proper spot, I think it could be wheels up. I kind of hope there's somebody that the Chiefs would look to take at the end of the first round. But there's a lot of good landing spots for him. If Green Bay took him at the end of the first, I think he's another guy that's definitely going to go in the first round. But for me, I just don't think for a lot of other people that he checks some of those boxes in terms of speed. And, he's not a Jaylen Waddle or Rondale Moore in terms of the just raw athleticism, but he can beat you in just about every other facet. He is a technician at wide receiver and just somebody that I think that has a really high ceiling at the next level.
Yeah, I normally despise and thoroughly hate comps, but I could see that Allen Robinson comp, like someone who's not going to just completely blow you away, but is solid in everything and, can get it done. And that's the other thing that I really like about Bateman is the fact that, like, I don't think he's one of these guys like someone who we're going to talk about here in a minute who, like, needs a particular landing spot to get the most out of him. Like, I think he could land damn near anywhere. Is he going to have, more upside in certain spots? Sure. But, like, he's not someone who that I'm looking at and being like, man, I really hope he doesn't go here, here, or here. Because I think he can, because of, you were talking about his route tree, I talked about playing inside and out. Because he can do all those things and do them, really well, he's someone who I'm not really all that worried about. Now, this is finally where we get a little bit of disagreement because we have the same top 3. You have Jaylen Waddle at 4. I have Rondale Moore at 4. I will let you have the floor here, and I'll give you first dibs. Talk to me about Jaylen Waddle, and then we didn't talk about this either. But is it a big difference with you between Waddle and Moore, or is it just something slight that, kind of just bumps Waddle up over Moore for you?
I think they're both very similar players. Waddle's a little bit bigger than he is, 5'10", 182. He's 22 years old. Some of the big differences between the two of them, you're not going to see any college dominator. His 24.1 college dominator is 32nd percentile, 21.8 breakout age, which is terrible, but he was somebody that, his best year was 2018 when he had 45 receptions for 848 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, I will say in this year, he was on pace to obliterate those numbers. 28 receptions, 591, and 4 touchdowns. But then he got hurt in week 5 and just completely destroyed his ankle. And I have no idea why he came back for the national title game. I get it's national title game. It's probably easier said than done for us, but the coaches should have held him out. He really could have, if he would have re-injured that, it could have derailed his NFL career. But listen, Jaylen Waddle is a super exciting player to watch, right? I think he might be the most explosive player in this draft. He's explosive off the line, can get to full speed in a drop of a hat. And he really does have terrific catch point, or he has the ability to high point a ball. Like, and I've seen some of the Tyreek Hill stuff, and I keep hearing it's every year. He's the new Tyreek Hill. He's not Tyreek Hill, okay? He's just not. And only reason I say that is because that he is such a fucking unicorn, like Tyreek Hill is. Let's not put him there. Like, I think for me, the guy that really stood out to me when I was watching, like, this guy really kind of reminds me of Tyler Lockett. Like, and Tyler Lockett was the same way, dynamic as a returner, which is exactly what Jaylen Waddle was. I mean, he's one of the best return men in college football. I think, at the very least, Jaylen Waddle is going to be a lock to be a guy who gets a ton of opportunities to punt, kick, return. You can rely on that, but that is not exciting for us as fantasy football guys. I will say that he is very limited in experience, only 900 total snaps. He has a small frame. So for me, when it comes to Jaylen Waddle, like, I think there's a very, very high ceiling for him, but I think he's going to have to go to the right spot, because if he don't, and he goes to, like, look at Henry Ruggs last year. We were saying a lot of the same stuff about Henry Ruggs. I mean, we weren't on this show. We were saying avoid Henry Ruggs, but I like Jaylen Waddle. I think that he can be dynamic. If he can land in the right spot and be in the right offense, I think he could be a really, really good prospect. Probably more of a wide receiver 2, probably for me. Maybe in just the absolute perfect system where maybe he has a couple wide receiver 1 seasons. But overall, like, he's a very fun prospect, and I think somebody has a high ceiling. The only other thing I'll say is this, and just looking at some of his advanced numbers with Jaylen Waddle, he had a 4.38 yards per reception, which was right behind Devonta Smith. 10.1 yards after a catch per reception, which is 6th among all wide receivers. 6 deep catches, and he had 19 receptions for 495 yards from the slot, and he played about 60% of the slot snaps. So obviously he's somebody that was playing in an offense with a ton of NFL talent, right? Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs last year, Devonta Smith was in that team, so he was kind of the 4th guy. This year, was his kind of supposed to be his coming out party, and he really did for the first 4 weeks. Like, he was producing every single week. I think he had over 100 yards every single week. So I mean, everything was looking forward, and then he destroyed his ankle, and that kind of derailed it. So for me, that's where I have Jaylen Waddle. I mean, if you don't know, what do you love so much about Rondale Moore?
I mean, really, a lot of the athletic traits that you were talking about with Waddle, I think you can kind of just transpose on Rondale Moore as well. The thing I like that pushes Moore over Waddle for me is I don't necessarily think he has to have that perfect landing spot. Do I think that he's going to do better with a more creative offense? Of course. But I think Waddle is just a little bit more raw right now. I think his upside is higher. I do see, I'm not making the comp, and he's definitely not there yet. But if everything lines up for him and he can develop correctly, I do see like a Tyreek Hill light, just in terms of his acceleration. His 0 to 60 is just fucking bonkers. And that shiftiness that he has, that that Tyreek also has. But I will say with Waddle, and then I'll go back to Moore, Waddle just like almost doesn't seem like he's in control of his body sometimes. Like, he's just fucking just like going, and like he doesn't decelerate, and like the shiftiness from him, like when Tyreek does it, he's very in control of his movements. And the sense I got from Waddle was just kind of, he was all over the place. But going back to Moore, just an absolutely dominant season as a freshman right out of the gate. And not like they're getting the 5-star quarterback recruits at Purdue the way that they are at Bama. So that was something that was super impressive to me. And I think he's just, like I said, a more overall polished receiver who's ready just to go right now. And that's why the way that he plays too, he's so strong, man. And his play strength and the way he's able just to get in there and at his size, because they're comparable. But at his size, the way that he's able to run through some dudes, and his contact balance, and things like that, That's why I have Moore higher than Waddle, but they're both close. I just give the edge to Moore because, like I said, mostly I'm not necessarily worried about landing spot, and I think he's ready to go right out of the box. Not in a way that Waddle is.
I'm going to argue with you whatsoever that Rondale Moore's ability as just an athlete, right? Like, he is an incredible athlete. And even at 5'9", 180, he's still only 20 years old, 36.7 college dominator, 29% target share, which is 81st percentile, 18.2, which is breakout age, which is one of the lowest ever for any wide receiver. I mean, really, it's kind of like him. And then I guess another guy that comes around like Brian Edwards last year, right? That was able to do that. But he is, I mean, coming out of high school, he ran a verified 4.33 40. He can squat 600, benches 300 for a dude that's 5'9", 180. This dude is just a fucking freak of nature as an athlete. And I am not denying that whatsoever. I do have some issues with some of the other things. I mean, his 2.25 yards per reception is fucking terrible. 7.0 yards after catch per reception is only was 50th, which isn't terrible. But 2.6 average depth of target. 2.6. I'm like, is that right? Like 2.6? And then you look further into it. 47 of his 117 receptions were screens. 47. Now, is that his fault? No, probably not. It's the way they use them. They wanted to get him in space. They wanted to get him out. I understand that, and that's why I understand all those things. But he ran a very, 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 very limited route tree. He only had 11 receptions in his entire college career that were intermediate routes or longer. 11. So, like, he is a very limited route tree. He's going to be somebody that's going to need some work at the next level. But you put him in that's why I do think he needs to go to a right offense. Because if you're not going to utilize him correctly, then I think it's going to be a problem. But the ceiling is very high for Rondale Moore. And he is an incredible athlete. And his breakout age, and I've heard people talk about, oh, well, yeah, you could talk about him because he didn't really do anything or because he didn't have any competition. I mean, I guess we haven't heard of David Bell, who could very well be a first-round pick next year. And so there was competition there, and it is playing at Purdue, which isn't some powerhouse with some powerhouse quarterbacks and powerhouse offenses. So there is a lot to like there, like I said, with Rondale Moore. Super athlete, right? If he can go to the right space, it could be wheels up. And it wouldn't surprise me if he turns out to be the second or third best. I remember watching him his rookie year when he played in Missouri and was like, this fucking guy is fucking good. Like, just crushed as a freshman against Missouri. And so, like, it still stands out to me. This is something I remember watching and seeing him. I was like, man, when this guy gets to the next level, this guy's going to be fun. And so, to me, Rondale Moore and Jaylen Waddle are super, super close. I think Jaylen Waddle at this point is a little bit more refined, but hands down, Rondale Moore is a better athlete than Jaylen Waddle is. Like, I've seen people talk about how, like, the 40 time they think Jaylen. Like, I've seen people talk about they think Jaylen Waddle is going to run like a 4.5. If he runs a 4.5, he's moving down. He's moving down the list for me, because that would be not good for somebody at his size. Like, he has to offer more in terms of speed for me, if that's the case. I think he'll probably run low 4.3s, high 4.4, or low 4.4s. But I've just seen some people suggest that it could end up being a 4.5. But if it's a 4.5, we got an issue for Jaylen Waddle. But they're super, super close. They're very similar prospects for me. Kind of athletes, guys that you can kind of get into space that we're seeing more and more at the next level. Guys like, a Deebo Samuel. Not that they're the same type of player, not the same built and all that stuff, but guys that you're going to maybe put in the backfield and manufacture touches that way. Kind of like you move them all around the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. So I like both of them quite a bit. They're both super, super close to me.
Yeah, I agree. This class is super interesting, and once we get the draft and all that, it's going to be really interesting to see who gets the capital and who gets the landing spots and all that. So that is going to wrap up the top 5 2021 wide receiver talk for tonight. Join us soon. We're going to be talking about wide receivers 6 to 10. If you're watching us on YouTube, drop a comment. Let us know what you think. How wrong you think we are. If who you disagreed with, who you agreed with. If you're listening on podcast form, leave us a rate and review. We appreciate all the support and all the feedback we've been getting, and we will keep kicking it with you guys all off season. Much more to come. Make sure you check everything out, and we'll talk to you all soon.